Hey everybody, it's David of Strong by Lee. It's the evening and I want to try to knock this video out of the way about carbohydrates. I want to spend the next couple of minutes talking to you about carbohydrates, and I want to talk to you about carbohydrates not only because I recently got off a coaching call earlier today with one of my clients discussing the role of carbohydrates, the functions of carbohydrates, most importantly if we should be scared of carbohydrates or not, but it's a very common topic. Like my clients, many people I think have their own preconceived notions about carbohydrates. They're wondering if carbohydrates are good or evil, how many carbohydrates they should eat, what are some sources of carbohydrates we can eat. It's very common, very controversial, and I want to try to do my best to provide you with a little bit of insight, my own approach towards carbohydrates. I try to be as unbiased as possible. I also try to provide information that is accurate, up-to-date, practical, relevant, realistic as a registered dietitian and a personal trainer who's trying to help his clients look, move, and feel better. Carbohydrates, one of those things, very context dependent, should be personalized, should be customized. Somebody who's 150 pounds probably will not eat the same amount of carbohydrates as another person who's 150 pounds because so many other factors that are playing into how much carbohydrates they should eat and what are the sources. All right, let's get right into it, okay? My clients and I get into conversations about carbohydrates quite frequently because there's always something to talk about. Let's run through a couple of scenarios that you might find some similar. Maybe you're asking these things, maybe you've asked them before, maybe you have other questions. Carbs make me fat. Will carbs make me fat? Will carbs make me moody? I feel moody sometimes after carbohydrates. I heard low carbs make me lose more weight. Is that true? I heard the ketogenic diet is good for you. Is that true? I don't really need to eat carbs, do I? Because I heard somebody say carbohydrates are not actually necessary for survival. And then what are carbs? The last one might seem like a surprise to you, but I think you would be even more surprised to find out most people don't know that much about carbohydrates, even though there's so much information out there. And I think it's because we're generally not taught the scientific rationale of carbohydrates, nutrition in particular, especially those of us who are baby boomers, Gen X. Most of the nutrition knowledge we have were passed down from our parents, our ancestors, because nutrition research wasn't as robust back then. Now that nutrition research is everywhere, even when I was going through New York University to receive my bachelor's in nutrition and dietetics, it was very heavily focused on research and clinical nutrition. And I think that is why when it comes to nutrition science, some of us younger folk might have a leg up on the older folk, but that doesn't necessarily invalidate what they know. It just gives us a little bit more of objectivity, more quantitative and qualitative measures when it comes to nutrition. And I'm hoping that I can present those facts to you, or at least combining facts with anecdotal evidence being what actually worked for my clients and helped them reach their fitness goals. First things first, one thing we want to get out of the way first is carbohydrates are not the enemy. They are not the devil. However, the devil is in the details. Context dependent personalization. There's no one size fits all when it comes to nutrition. You know how they say, oh, we're all different but we're all similar? When it comes to carbohydrates, yes, most of us should eat carbohydrates for optimal function and quality of life. In fact, if we ever plan on having a social life, most likely we're going to eat something that contains carbohydrates, and a lot of delicious foods contain carbohydrates. But also, we want to make sure that the amount of carbohydrates we're eating is tailored to our individual needs and wants, and how we're going to use carbohydrates to achieve our fitness goals. I'll also get this one thing out of the way. In my years as a personal trainer and a registered dietitian, I've worked with over 400 people. I have never, ever ran into somebody who got fat off of just eating carbohydrates. I've met people who eat 2-3 pounds of fruits for breakfast, but they don't get fat. Do they have subpar energy, subpar performance? Probably, because I think there's an imbalance. They are having a lot of sugar, a huge influx of sugar at one time, but I've never seen or heard of anyone getting fat over fruits. Their are other types of foods, so we should be careful about, that do contain carbs that many people mistakenly believe as carbs, but are actually not true carbohydrate sources. What do you think some of those foods are? Pasta, pizza, chips, pastries. Many times people think these are carbohydrate sources, but in reality, if you look at where most of the calories, the energy comes from, you'll find out most of them come from fats, for a couple of reasons. Number one, 1 gram of fat has more than double the amount of calories as 1 gram of carbohydrate, 9 versus 4. And also, fats typically don't register on our hunger scale as well as carbohydrates do. In other words, fat are less filling than carbohydrates for the most part, unless we're talking about refined, highly processed carbohydrate sources like sugar, bleached flour, things of those nature. For the most part, though, when you have a food that is high in fat, carbohydrates, and salt, those three, that trifecta that we have talked about in many previous podcasts and videos, you might run into trouble. That is a recipe for gaining weight, because those types of foods bypass your hunger signals and encourage the overconsumption of them. Pizza. If we break pizza down its constituents, you have the dough, you have cheese, you have oil, you have pasta sauce, and toppings, vegetables, sausages. Most people aren't just going to eat those on their own. How many people do you know will scoop out marinara sauce and just eat it by itself? Not many people. How many people will eat plain dough? Not many people. How many people will eat plain cheese? Probably a little bit more than the marinara and the dough group, but probably not that many people. I think a lot more people would prefer to combine them all together and make some delicious pizza. Isn't it crazy how just combination can change the whole structure and the nature of food? That is the dangerous part. When it comes to losing weight and carbohydrates, a lot of times it's not the carbohydrates. A lot of times it's actually the fat. Most importantly, it's the combination of certain foods that encourage the overconsumption of calories. Let's keep that in mind. I don't want to stray too far away from the actual topic at hand, the specific topic of carbohydrates. So this will be a conversation for a different day. Now, when done correctly, like most things, carbohydrates have the potential to be extremely user and body friendly. And what do I mean by that? Carbohydrates are the preferred energy source of the body and the brain during high intensity activity. In fact, research indicates the brain needs about 130 grams of glucose. And we don't want to get glucose confused with carbohydrates. Carbohydrates eventually get broken down into 3 simple sugars: glucose, fructose, and galactose. The brain needs glucose, 130 grams roughly. The average brain needs roughly 130 grams of glucose per day. Now, the body can synthesize glucose from various sources, fats and carbohydrates. So you don't have to always eat carbohydrates in order to supply the brain with the 130 grams of glucose. But it is the easiest way because the conversion process is so much simpler than if you were to convert fats into ketones, which the brain can also use. Again, we can talk about that at a different time. Just wanting to let you know that there's a difference between glucose and carbohydrates in the way that the brain uses glucose. Secondly, the point that we made before about how carbohydrates aren't technically necessary is actually true. Unlike proteins and fats, which are required for the body to create hormones, your body doesn't actually need carbohydrates in order to survive. Like I said before, the body can create and synthesize carbohydrates from other sources, especially in order to feed your brain. The carbohydrates, sugars, are also required for the blood, for the sperm, for various other things, for energy production. So what you can see is, what logically the conclusion we can reach and assume is, consuming carbohydrates improves and optimizes our quality of life, our energy, and our performance for most people. So while carbohydrates are not necessary, they might be desired for optimal functioning. And when it comes to carbohydrates, we have to learn about glycogen. Glycogen is the scientific term for stored sugars in the body. When your body breaks down carbohydrate sources, potatoes, oatmeal, rice, gummy bears, whatever the case is, it's going to come in, It's going to get digested, starting from the saliva in the mouth, down through the stomach, through the small intestine, and it'll eventually get broken down into those 3 simple sugars: fructose, galactose, and glucose. And depending on what you're doing at the time, if you're working out, if you're not working out, if you had just finished working out, if you just woke up, if it's dinner time, your body will do something differently with those carbohydrates, with those forms of sugar. A lot of times, in the average American, the body will store them in muscle and the liver as the respective forms of glycogen: muscle glycogen and liver glycogen. The liver glycogen is responsible for 2 main things: providing glucose to the blood and stabilizing blood sugar, how much sugar is actually in the blood. Muscle glycogen is usually stored for a rainy day. If you're working out, if your muscles are contracting, when you contract your muscles hard and fast, it's going to use the glycogen as the preferred energy source. The average human being can store anywhere between 400 to 500 grams of glycogen. Now the problem comes up that the standard American diet for most Americans, and I think this is a big part of why a lot of Americans are overweight, not only is the standard American diet characterized by foods that are high in the trifecta, the fat, carbohydrates, and the sodium, Americans generally tend to be less active in relations to how many carbohydrates they're eating. When I said before, carbohydrates are the preferred energy source for high intensity activity and physical exercise. If you're not exercising yet you have high levels of carbohydrates, what's generally going to happen is this thing called glycogen spillover. When you tap out your body's ability to store glycogen in the muscle and in the liver, what the liver is going to do is going to convert it into fat. Although this doesn't usually happen at high rates, when you tap out the storage capacity for liver and muscle glycogen, it will happen at accelerated rates. The bigger question is that accelerated rate enough to manifest itself into measurable amounts of fat accumulation? We don't know yet because there's so many other variables. What researchers can safely assume, though, is a lot of times in the standard American diet, fat intake is also really high. So you combine high fat intake, high carbohydrate intake, high salt, and you have a recipe for weight gain. So carbohydrates are implicated in that way, but it's really hard to isolate the actual role of carbohydrates in weight gain. Remember, carbohydrates are intricately related to your physical activity levels. The more physically active you are, the more you can get away with a higher carbohydrate intake. Of course, we want good carbohydrate sources, but suffice it to say, you can get away with a higher carbohydrate intake and still look good, still feel good, and be fab compared to the average person who does not work out. Okay? I talked about the high fat intake. Now, I talked about how a lot of people eat in relations to their physical activity level above in terms of their carbohydrates and their fats. Right, so we got that all out of the way. Man, I'm covering a lot of this article without actually going through the article. I think that's kind of good. It's also kind of bad because it shows in this video. All right, so there are 3 types of carbohydrates that eventually get broken down into simple sugars, right? Well, actually 4 if you really think about it. We mentioned that the 3 main sugars are glucose, fructose, and galactose. The way your body gets those sugars are from a few different sources. You have the non-starchy vegetables. The non-starchy vegetables are the cruciferous green leafy vegetables such as arugula, spinach, cauliflower, broccoli, Swiss chard, collard greens. Those are all the non-starchy carbohydrates / vegetables. They have high levels of fiber and they generally don't have sugar and starch. Most of the carbohydrates come from fiber because fiber is considered a carbohydrate source. You also have fruits, hence the name fructose. Fructose comes from fruits because fruits are primarily made of that fructose sugar. Then you have starches such as potatoes, rice, pasta. A lot of starchy foods are characterized by low sugar intake but high carbohydrate intake. If you look on the nutrition label of rice, let's say, for example, a serving of rice, a cup of rice might have 50 grams of total carbohydrates, but 2 grams of sugar. And that's because sugar usually means if it's if it's fructose or a combination of fructose and glucose. But starches are pure glucose and is generally not listed under the nutrition label. Those types of starches will get preferentially sent to the muscle, especially when you're working out. And then you have galactose from the dairy. One thing that we want to mention about fructose is the liver is very unique in processing fructose because it has a particular enzyme to do so. The enzyme doesn't really exist in any appreciable amounts in other areas of the body, which explains why those areas of the body or other areas of the body outside of the liver can't process fructose in high quantities. Only the liver can. The liver really only has about a 50 gram storage capacity for carbohydrates, which means it can get tapped out a lot easier. Logically, that stands to reason, should you limit your fruit intake. I think you don't necessarily want to limit fruit intake the same way you want to limit, bleached flour. But I think you should be a little bit more careful about fruit intake versus, say, rice or potatoes because of the way the body processes the fructose in the fruit. How many fruits per day should you eat? The most I recommend my clients, 4 fruits per day, 4 servings of fruit per day. That could either be a cup of fruit or 1 whole fruit. 4 per day should be good enough for most people. I usually recommend about 2 per day for most clients, but I've had clients go up to 4. Next, let's go into certain sources of these foods. As I mentioned before, non-starchy carbohydrates, really simple: asparagus, broccoli, green beans, cauliflower, chard, collard greens, kale, lettuce, spinach, beet, mustard, dandelion greens, watercress, cabbage. Just look on the label. If it doesn't have a high amount of carbohydrates and it has fiber, it's usually a non-starchy carbohydrate. Carrots may be an exception. When carrots are eaten raw, they act very differently in the body than when they're eaten cooked. When they're eaten cooked, they actually have a higher proportion of sugar. For some reason, the cooking process modifies the molecular structure of the sugars that are found in carrots. You just got to be careful with that. Fruits, fructose, sources of fructose. Fruits can be a great addition to a meal plan because they provide water too. And most fruits are over 90% water. And they have vitamins, minerals, and fiber, and in higher quantities than what you might find. For example, 1 cup of raspberries, which I consider to be the healthiest fruit that you can eat, has 20 grams, roughly 20 grams of carbohydrates, but 9 grams of fiber and only 6 grams of sugar. I would call that a powerhouse fruit, a fruit that you can eat with reckless abandon. Other fruits, of course, oranges, apples, pears, apricot, banana, kiwi, pineapple, mango, papaya. You can find the nutrition label for any of these fruits, and you'll find they have a very high proportion of carbohydrates and sugars versus berries. Raspberries, strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, boysenberries. Berries are probably the best ones. There are exceptions to fruits though. Even though avocados and coconuts are considered fruits, their composition is a little bit different. They actually have high fat content, and avocado will be considered a fat source if you eat it, even though it is considered a fruit. There's some things that you have to be careful about. Nuances in nutrition, I'm telling you, they can be so annoying. Now, starches. These are the ones that also seem to get a bad reputation, right? Because the starches make up the pizza, they make up the pasta, they make up the chips, because you have the dough, you have the wheat, you have the grains, and you have the potatoes. And they're delicious when they're paired correctly. So when you pair or combine or triplet carbohydrate, salt, and fats, that's when you're going to get that particular combination. It's very hedonistic, right? But like I mentioned before, carbohydrates are not the problem. The problem is the combination. Please remember that. So other starches that you can probably incorporate into the diet: grains, rice, oatmeal, potatoes, legumes, beans, quinoa, taro, jicama. These are all good carbohydrate sources. You just have to make sure you can tolerate them. Some people, they might have some issues with their digestive system. They might have an autoimmune disease that doesn't allow them to eat particular types of carbohydrates. Right? Next, how many carbs should I eat per day? Well, this all really depends on your activity level. If you want to get some quick and dirty formulas though, people who do not train consistently and are minimally active might not need to go over 150 grams of carbohydrates per day. And 150 grams, you might not have an idea of what that looks or sounds like. In a different segment, we'll go over that. People who train consistently, up to 4 days per week, so anywhere between 2, 3 to 4 days per week, can probably go up to 250 carbs. And I say probably because not everyone is the same. And then finally, people who train hard for 5 to 6 days per week can probably go up to 500 to 600 grams of carbohydrates. Now, these could be the professional athletes, the CrossFit athletes, the figure competitors, people who work out for several hours per day. But these are just general guidelines, and they should be approached individually. And what about when can I eat carbohydrates? We went over what the carbohydrates are, how many carbohydrates should I eat, and then when can I eat carbohydrates? I think the best times to eat carbohydrates are before and after your workout. And on days you're not working out, I would say the best time to eat carbohydrates probably for breakfast. That would probably be where your highest level of carbohydrates are. Aside from that, if you're training, the highest amount of carbohydrates will come in your post-workout meal, the meal after your workout. When it comes to how to structure or how to incorporate the different carbohydrate types into your day, I would think non-starchy carbohydrates are great for low carbohydrate days when you're not really doing anything. I would say fruits are great for medium carbohydrate days. You can probably eat anywhere between 2 to 4 on a medium carbohydrate day. And finally, starches are the best for high carbohydrate days. That's when you're going to have the oatmeal, the bread, the rice, the beans at all of your meals to make sure you're meeting your carbohydrate needs on those high days, since most likely you're going to have higher levels of physical activity. Okay, which brings us to what are these low, medium, and high days, and how come the amount of carbohydrates are ascribed a value to what day it actually is. And there's a method called carbohydrate cycling, in which you modify the amount of carbohydrates you eat based on what you're doing for that day. If you're working out hard 2 times a week, 3 times a week, I've known people like this, you might have really high levels of carbohydrates to promote energy, performance, and recovery. But this is more of an advanced method I don't usually recommend for people who aren't training regularly and have a minimal knowledge of nutrition, and also for people who are in good shape and looking to reach the next level. Cycling carbs could be a good option, right? Low days, pretty self-explanatory. When you're doing minimal activities such as walking, yoga, lounging around. Walking you might think is a good exercise, but if you want your body to start using the carbohydrates, you want brisk walking, power walking, maybe walking on an incline. You want to break a sweat and really get your heart rate jacked up through walking if you want the body to start using up carbohydrates. Medium days are when you do the cardiovascular work and the leisurely activities. Your heart rate might be a little bit higher than if you were to do a brisk walk, such as if you're rowing, you're swimming, you're running, you're on the elliptical for moderate periods of time, your heart rate being anywhere between 60 to 75%, I think that'll be good. High days, hard resistance training. I have a couple clients who do cardio in the morning. She might burn 1,000, 1,200 calories in the morning, and then she trains twice in the afternoon when it comes to resistance training. Well, it's 2 separate days, not back to back. Those would be considered her high days, and she would have a higher amount of carbohydrates, right? So remember the takeaway points for carbohydrates, and I hope the main takeaway point you learn from this is that carbohydrates are not evil. They're not the devil. Devil's in the details. Context dependent, should be personalized. Carbohydrates are the preferred energy source for the working body, the working brain and body for the muscles. Carbohydrates are also necessary to manage your blood sugar. Necessary meaning, they're necessary. They're good for optimal quality of life. They're not mandatory because carbohydrates are not actually required for survival. Carbohydrates are also very closely associated with your physical activity levels. The more physically active you are, the more you could probably get away with higher levels of carbohydrates. And your body will use those carbohydrates to burn for fuel and to promote the recovery of the muscle and skeletal tissues. Right? So this was a thing about carbohydrates. It was kind of long. I know it was kind of long, but I figured that we could probably knock out a bunch of birds with one stone, maybe 2 stones. Depends on how good of a thrower you are. I hope this was helpful. If it was, even if it wasn't, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please shoot them over to me at david@strongbylee.com. I am looking forward to hearing from you. I really hope this carb segment was helpful. please share it if it was. Send me some feedback. David@strongbylee.com. Plug. If you need a little bit more assistance, guidance, and accountability, either virtually or in person, give me a shout. Let's talk. Let's see if there is any capacity for me to help you, to work with you. And yeah, that's basically it. So shoot your feedback, comments over to me, David@strongbylee.com. All right? Toodaloo.